Have you ever noticed how we live in a world where what you wear matters more than who you are? Where the cut of your clothes, the brand of your sneakers, or the shine of your watch speaks louder than your story, your education, or your values? It's cruel, but it's real. In many places, unfortunately, appearance still weighs more than character. And this story you're about to hear exposes that truth in a way that might make you rethink a lot. Picture this. A young woman walks alone into a luxurious restaurant, the kind where silverware is already on the table, the waiters speak softly, and a single appetizer costs what some families spend on groceries for a month. She's dressed simply: jeans, a plain t-shirt, and worn-out sneakers. No heels, no fancy makeup, no flashy jewelry, just an ordinary girl. But in that place, built on appearances, she became invisible. The waiters pretended not to see her. The manager looked her up and down and approached with a dry smile, the kind that hides arrogance behind fake politeness. "Are you sure you're in the right place, miss?" he asked, almost laughing. Other customers whispered and stared at her like she had committed a social crime just by being there. But the most humiliating moment was still to come. A digital influencer sitting 2 tables away started filming her on his phone, laughing and telling his followers that not everyone knows where they're welcome, as if the young woman were a walking meme. But what no one there knew was that she was waiting for someone, and not just anyone. About 7 minutes later, an armored SUV, the kind that stands out even among luxury cars, pulled up right in front of the restaurant. A well-dressed man, in a tailored suit and with a serious expression, stepped out. He looked around, walked into the restaurant with firm steps, and got straight to the point. "Where's my daughter? She messaged me saying she was humiliated here." Silence fell instantly. The laughter stopped. Eyes darted away. And the influencer filming quickly lowered his phone, knowing he had crossed a line. The manager, pale, tried to form a response, but nothing came out. That was the moment this story changed direction. The man was a well-known billionaire in the business world. Discreet, far from the public eye, but deeply respected. And there he was, in front of everyone, defending his daughter. Not with shouting, but with presence. "This isn't about money, it's about respect," he said calmly. "If you treat someone with contempt just because of their clothes, I can only imagine how you treat people who can't afford the bill." Then he added, "Today I'll pay for the entire room, including generous tips for the few who didn't take part in this humiliation." Shock swept through the place. The young woman with teary eyes stood up and was embraced by her father. And there, in front of everyone, he whispered something to her that would later be shared by thousands. "You don't need to change who you are to fit into places that only see you from the outside. The right places will recognize you from the inside." That phrase became the symbol of this story, which went viral days later. Not because of the offensive video, but because of another one that was posted. A heartfelt account by the young woman herself, sharing how that experience taught her that the world still has a lot to learn. This is not a story about wealth, it's about awareness. Because no amount of money can buy the value of a meaningful gesture. What moved thousands wasn't the armored SUV or the powerful surname. It was a father's stance that showed character speaks without shouting. That respect isn't demanded through rage, but through integrity. And that justice can show up in small gestures, in the strength of a calm voice, and in the power of a presence that doesn't need to prove anything. And if this story resonates with you, maybe it's because, in some way, it's also yours. How many times have you been judged before people knew what you carry inside? How many doors have closed because someone thought you didn't look right for the part? And even more, have you ever been on the other side? Have you ever looked at someone with disdain, even if unintentionally? These are uncomfortable reflections, but necessary ones. Because we live in times where appearances still shape decisions, silence talents, and reinforce prejudice. And that's exactly why we need more stories like this one. Stories that show what really matters, that remind us that behind every simple t-shirt might be a huge heart, that behind silence may be incredible courage, and that the loudest voices aren't always the ones that are right. That young woman could have walked out of that restaurant silent, hurt, feeling small, but she chose to turn pain into awareness. She didn't seek revenge. She didn't curse anyone. She didn't cancel anyone. She just shared. And by doing that, she touched lives. She touched people who were never seen in job interviews because they didn't dress right. She touched students who were dismissed by teachers. She touched professionals who were underestimated in meetings. She touched people who, like her, had to swallow humiliation in silence. And maybe the most beautiful part of this story is exactly that. the ability to turn a sad moment into a movement of empathy. Because in the end, what changes the world isn't billionaires, it's gestures, it's glances, it's the choices of those who treat others with humanity, even when no one's watching. So the next time you walk into a place and see someone who doesn't look like they belong, take a deep breath and remember, you don't know the story they carry. And maybe, just maybe, they have more to teach you than to impress you. And if this story touched you in any way, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because that's how we change the world. One act at a time. One awakened heart at a time. One story at a time. Emily didn't look like someone important. Basic clothes, hair tied up carelessly, worn-out sneakers. But you see, the world teaches us to confuse simplicity with insignificance. And that's exactly what happened at that restaurant. The moment she walked through the door, she was ignored like she didn't exist. No waiter looked her in the eye, and the manager, with thick irony, even suggested she find a more appropriate place. Funny how the most powerful stories often begin with rejection, right? The truth is, behind that cold reception lies a much deeper issue. Our addiction to judging by appearances. And it doesn't have to happen in a fancy restaurant. It could be in a job interview, a store, or even a group of friends. We see a faded shirt and immediately assume a bank balance. It's more common than you think. And every time it happens, we lose the chance to live one of those stories that could have changed everything. Now imagine yourself in Emily's shoes, alone, ignored, feeling like you don't belong. It's not just uncomfortable. It's a harsh reminder of how the world treats those who don't wear labels. But here's the thing. Was the game already lost for her? Or maybe, the most powerful turnarounds come right after the cruelest silences? The whispers at nearby tables didn't go unnoticed. She must be lost. Did she come in asking for donations? Some said, not even trying to hide their scorn. One influencer, phone in hand, was secretly recording, as if it were a joke. And here lies one of the most silent dangers of social media, the normalization of mockery. When someone becomes entertainment just for not fitting the standard, we stop telling human stories and start spreading prejudice. What's most striking is that judgment doesn't even need to be spoken aloud to hurt. Sometimes it's in a sideways glance, a smirk, or the total lack of acknowledgement. And anyone who's been through it knows, it hurts more than insults. The problem is we're building a culture where appearance is a resume and empathy a rare luxury, and that culture kills possibilities, it kills connections, it kills stories that might have been unforgettable. If you've ever laughed at someone for seeming out of place, you may not have realized how much that says about your own perspective. The truth is, those who appear out of place are often just ahead of their time, or carry a strength the world hasn't yet seen. But hold on, something big is still coming, because sometimes all it takes is a message, a single line of text, to change the course of an entire story. As the room buzzed with cruel comments, Emily shrank into herself. With her phone in hand and her pride bruised, she typed one sentence. They wouldn't even let me see the menu. There was no outrage, no demands, just a quiet confession. The kind we send when pain spills over and silence no longer holds. Little did she know that at that very moment, she was opening the door to one of the most unexpected stories that restaurant would ever witness. This gesture, as simple as it was powerful, showed us just how much we underestimate the strength of a silent plea. Sometimes you don't need to shout to be heard. And more often than not, the answer that changes everything comes right after our most vulnerable moment. Emily didn't ask for justice. She didn't demand respect. She simply let her sadness slip through. And that's when the world began to move in her favor. Have you ever stopped to think how many stories were written in that space between pain and the courage not to stay silent? In life, knowing how to ask for help with dignity is rarer than it seems. It's not about weakness. It's about connection. About allowing someone into your story exactly when it's on the verge of falling apart. And speaking of powerful entries, what happened right after that message would make everyone in that room stand up. Literally. A few minutes passed, and then, the sound of tires on the cobblestone cut through the laughter. A bulletproof SUV, the kind that doesn't ask permission to impress, parked right in front of the restaurant. The door opened with quiet elegance, and out stepped Robert Walsh. Yes, the Robert Walsh. A renowned businessman, a familiar face on business magazine covers, the head of a vast empire. The room, once buzzing with mockery, fell into frozen silence. Little did they know, they were about to become background extras in one of the most talked-about stories of the year. Robert walked in with the calm confidence of someone who knows the weight of his presence. He didn't wear extravagance, he wore presence. And in seconds, the scene shifted like a movie. That same reception that had denied his daughter a menu was now scrambling in desperation to greet him. But he wasn't there to dine. He was there for something much more important: dignity. The most ironic part? Everyone realized it far too late. Some stories only reveal their worth when there's no turning back. There's something almost poetic about the power of timing. The same door that closed on Emily swung wide open for Robert. But it wasn't the car that turned the tables. It was the gesture. A father who showed up unannounced. An authority that didn't need to raise its voice. And here's where the story starts demanding its price. The discomfort of realizing you may have judged the wrong person. There were no screams, no uproar. But the moment Robert stepped through that door with that piercing gaze, the entire restaurant froze. Forks stopped midair. The waiters who had ignored Emily moments ago now looked like kids caught red-handed. And the manager, sweating, confused, trying to figure out where he'd gone wrong. With a firm and steady voice, Robert asked the question that sliced through the air like a hot knife. Where's my daughter? Was the table I reserved for her canceled? And that, my friend, was the start of one of the greatest turnarounds a luxury restaurant had ever witnessed. It's curious how real authority doesn't need to yell. It commands in tone and posture and clarity. Robert wasn't there to show off, nor to intimidate. He was there because someone had disrespected the person he loved most. And that stance, poised between care and indignation, stripped away the fake smiles and forced politeness of that place. We fool ourselves into thinking respect can be selective. But this story was living proof that the respect you deny will eventually return to collect. Some moments are so heavy, even the air feels different. And that's exactly what happened. Not a single word was hostile, but every syllable from Robert put the restaurant's values on trial. And if you think that was the end, we hadn't even seen the damage this story would cause once it spread, like an echo too loud to ignore. Robert didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His words were like a mirror, reflecting everything that restaurant had tried to hide beneath white tablecloths and fake courtesy. My daughter should have been treated with the same respect as any other customer, with or without a designer label. That alone made many shrink in their own shame. Why? Because when power walks hand in hand with conscience, it becomes a weapon for change. And the best stories carry exactly that kind of strength. It's easy to fight back with anger. What's hard is to expose the wrong with elegance. Robert could have yelled, sued, made a scene, but he chose to teach. As a father, as a leader, as a man who knows that real change begins when someone feels defenseless, the full weight of their injustice. And in that moment, it wasn't just a denied meal at stake. It was what that situation revealed about how we treat people in everyday life. How many similar stories have gone unnoticed out there? Robert's elegant confrontation hit harder than any outburst ever could. It was surgical, because it didn't just reveal the error, it exposed the system, the rotten logic that only those with fancy labels or famous surnames deserve respect. And that's when the story spilled out the restaurant doors, onto the streets, into WhatsApp groups, all over Instagram videos. But the best part was still to come, and it would come from the very person who, until recently, was just the butt of the joke. The internet has its flaws, but it's got a special talent for flipping the script. And that's exactly what happened. The video that first made the rounds with captions like, "Look at the lost girl in the fancy restaurant," reappeared hours later under a new headline. The simple girl was heir to an empire. Who's embarrassed now? The turnaround was so fast that many didn't even have time to delete their nasty comments. And so, that humiliating moment became one of the most viewed and debated stories in the country. This kind of twist shows how social media can be a double-edged sword. The one who filmed to mock ended up at the center of a storm of criticism. Influencers who laughed became targets of reflection. Brands got dragged into it. And the restaurant? Well, they had to do some serious damage control, all because of a mistake that could have been avoided with just an ounce of respect. That's why they say, think twice before mocking someone. You might be filming your own shame. The stories that go viral rarely end the way they started. And while the video swept across the country, something bigger was unfolding behind the scenes. Because once public judgment enters the stage, consequences fall like dominoes. And the first to fall was the pride of those who thought they could control the narrative. But Emily still hadn't said a word, and when she finally did, the story gained a new chapter, even more powerful. When the bomb goes off in public, no official statement can fix it all. But the restaurant tried. They posted a formal apology, cited a service failure, mentioned reviewed procedures, all in the tone of someone trying to salvage reputation and clientele. But Robert didn't buy it. With few words and firm resolve, he withdrew the lifetime reservation he had held there for corporate events. That alone represented millions in losses. Some stories don't just bruise egos, they hit where it hurts most, the pocket. That's when many realized the size of the disaster. That restaurant, once used to pampering celebrities, now found itself in headlines for discriminating against a young woman for dressing simply. Longtime clients canceled dinners. Business partners started reconsidering contracts, and all of it because of an act that, to those present, seemed like just a misunderstanding. Like they say, the biggest downfalls don't start with earthquakes. They begin with tiny cracks we refuse to see. And this story became a textbook example. While the restaurant scrambled to clean its image, the one truly cleansing people's souls was Emily herself. Still silent, she earned the respect of thousands. After all, there was no way to unsee what had been seen, no way to pretend the lesson wasn't delivered. But when she finally broke the silence, the story stopped being just hers and became one shared by everyone who's ever been unfairly judged. It took time, but it came. When Emily chose to speak, it wasn't with bitterness. It wasn't with revenge. It was with wisdom. Her social media post didn't mention names or accusations. Just one sentence, one that echoed like a silent scream in thousands of hearts. The clothes you wear do not define the respect you deserve. And in that simple text, she stopped being just Robert Walsh's daughter. She became the voice of an entire generation. Her story became the symbol of something far greater, the right to be treated with dignity, regardless of the wrapping. The impact was immediate. Thousands of likes, comments, shares. People shared similar stories, revealed traumas, exposed scars society hides beneath labels and polish. It was like opening a door many had kept locked out of shame. Emily wasn't seeking fame. She was seeking justice, and ended up finding something even more powerful: representation. Sometimes all someone needs is to see they're not alone, to finally rise. And while the spotlight turned to her, what struck people most was the calm with which she handled it all. She didn't become an influencer. She didn't monetize the scandal. She just kept being herself. And that is what made this story one of the most inspiring of the year. But more than just inspiring, it started transforming how we look, how we think, and maybe even how we treat each other. That scene, which began with scorn and indifference, ended as a turning point. What seemed like just another ordinary lunch became a headline in newspapers, a topic in podcasts, and the center of conversation in countless households. Emily's story made people reflect, reconsider their behavior, and confront silent biases. Because deep down, we've all either been an Emily or ignored one. And when something stirs people this deeply, it's because it touches a collective wound we can no longer pretend doesn't exist. More than a lesson, this story became a mirror. It showed that respect should never depend on brands, appearance, or status. It revealed that empathy is not a favor. It's a social duty. And it proved, with rare elegance, that real change doesn't come from shouting, but from the alignment between values and actions. Emily didn't have to stand up from her chair for everyone around her to wake up. And that kind of impact is what turns the ordinary into the extraordinary. Today, when someone brings up that viral video, they're not just talking about the SUV or the famous businessman. They're talking about the quiet courage of a young woman who didn't have to say much to be heard, about the poise of a father who acted with no audience but sparked a wave of awareness, and about one of the most shared stories of the year, not because of scandal, but because it awakened something long asleep, the collective desire to be and do better. Now be honest with yourself. How many times have you judged someone by their appearance without even realizing it? Maybe it was a quick glance while crossing the street, or when someone sat next to you on public transport. Sometimes the judgment comes not with words, but with silent discomfort, an unconscious distancing, or a stifled laugh after noticing how someone dresses, talks, or walks. The worst part? We often don't even notice we're doing it, but we are. And that's how the most silent stories begin, the ones that hurt the most, yet go unseen. Emily's story is just one of thousands that happen every day, everywhere. There's nothing extraordinary about it, and that's exactly why it matters so much. Because the pain of prejudice rarely comes in loud declarations. Most of the time it shows up quietly, in a dry gesture, a cold reception, a look from above. Emily walked into that restaurant like anyone else, hungry, hoping for a pleasant moment, with simple expectations and a polite smile. But her modest appearance, the lack of makeup, and her worn-out sneakers were enough to make her invisible. And that's how another story of judgment began. The waiters passed by her as if she didn't exist. The manager offered a sarcastic smile and a veiled suggestion. Perhaps you'd feel more comfortable at another establishment. She wasn't yelled at. She wasn't kicked out. She wasn't assaulted, but she was belittled, silently, subtly, just like so many others are every single day in the corridors of life. And the most painful part? No one there had any idea who Emily was. No one asked what she did for a living, why she was alone, or what that quiet smile was hiding. Maybe you've been Emily. Maybe you were the waiter, the manager, or even the bystander who said nothing. And it's okay to admit that. What's not okay is pretending it doesn't happen. Or worse, acting like it doesn't matter. Because every action counts. Every choice we make in the face of these stories shapes the kind of world we live in. And if what happened to Emily bothered you, then this too is your story. Now think about this. How many opportunities have you missed by underestimating someone? How many connections did you fail to make just because the other person didn't seem to fit? How many lessons were dismissed because the packaging wasn't polished enough? It's hard to admit, I know, but that's where awareness begins. When we force ourselves to look inward and recognize the distorted filters through which we see others. Emily could be your daughter, your sister, your mother, or even you, and if not today, maybe tomorrow. At that same restaurant, just minutes later, a luxury SUV pulled up outside. A well-dressed man with a confident gaze and steady steps stepped out. It was Emily's father, a billionaire entrepreneur who needed no introduction. He didn't enter shouting. He didn't demand special treatment. He didn't ask for apologies. He simply asked, "Has my daughter arrived?" We had a reservation. Within seconds, the entire atmosphere changed. The waiters rushed. The manager turned pale. Shame replaced contempt. But it was too late. The wound had already been opened. It's not about the car. It's not about the money. It's not about power. It's about the respect that only appeared after the last name and the bank account were revealed. And there lies the real issue. We live in a society that only learns to respect when it's forced to, that only acknowledges value after seeing a badge, a designer label, or a famous last name. But what about the stories of those who have none of that? Do they not matter? The truth is, the world is full of Emilys, full of amazing people being dismissed because they don't look important. And it's not just in fancy restaurants. It happens in job interviews, classrooms, hospital lines, neighborhood meetings, and in unread messages. It happens online, where appearances dictate who deserves attention and who gets ignored. What Emily's story teaches us is that one wrong choice, or rather, one biased look, can destroy what could have been a meaningful connection. And if the SUV hadn't shown up, that story would have ended differently. It would have been just another invisible woman, walking away with a broken heart and silent pain. And who would remember her the next day? No one, because those humiliated in silence suffer alone. And that's the kind of pain that spreads the most, without anyone noticing. But what if we changed that? What if instead of waiting for a Porsche to pull up, we started treating everyone with equal respect? Always. What if instead of judging by what we see, we sought to understand what people carry inside? This isn't just a pretty speech. It's a necessity. It's about human survival. It's what makes stories truly beautiful. The ability to recognize ourselves in one another. You, reading this right now, maybe you felt this judgment before. Maybe you've been treated as less than, ignored, or dismissed. Maybe you've left a place feeling like you didn't belong. And let me tell you, you're not alone. Your pain isn't invisible. Your story matters, even when the world tries to tell you otherwise. And if you've never been through this, that's great. But it doesn't exempt you from responsibility, because those who don't suffer prejudice can help dismantle it. Those who aren't directly targeted can still be a voice of support. And those who are aware have the power and the duty to do better. Change doesn't begin with the billionaire in the SUV. It starts with the waiter who chooses kindness, with the customer who speaks up for someone mistreated, with you, now that you understand that every story has value, even the ones that begin in silence. So if Emily's story made you think, share it, show someone, use it as a reminder. Because sometimes we need to read something like this to realize we're writing part of the story too. And if you want to keep growing, evolving, and seeing the world through deeper eyes, stay with us. The next stories might be even more powerful. And who knows, maybe one of them will be yours.